So, hey, BookTube. This book haul is probably going to be a little bit smaller than usual because all of these books were handpicked from my grandparents' bookshelf, and so you can see the spines are cracking and they're quite old, but there's a lot of beauty and history within them, which is what we're going to speak about today. The first book is called Africa South in Exile. This is volume 4, number 4, from July to September 1960, and it is signed off by J.E. Spence from the Department of Political Science in the University of Natal. So it used to be known as the University of Natal. It's now the University of KwaZulu-Natal. But although the name has changed, essentially nothing has changed in terms of the very exclusionary academic policies, which leads to a certain level of academic censorship, historical revisionism, anti-intellectualism, and it just reinforces the ethno-nationalistic regime that we are currently living in. The university has also been implicated in various corruption scandals, particularly within the medical faculty, as to who gets admitted, who gets placed for their internship, who gets placed for the community service, all of those things. But anytime that you find Gujarati banyas, you are going to find corruption, and it all just points back to the drug trafficking that they are currently engaging in. You can look that up yourself. So that in itself is enough to tarnish the good name and the good standing and the good reputation of that university. But the ongoing police occupation of that university as well has led to the murders of multiple students. So via rubber bullets, stun grenades, tear gas. Some of my loved ones attended the university and they said that while they were writing tests, they would be tear gassed. And I mean, I remember even when I was in grade 2 and 3, there would be windows shattering around me and the glass would be breaking and there would be strikers outside. And we would have to hide and pretend that we were not there so that we could avoid being attacked. And this, I mean, that was in school. It's not really comparable to stun grenades in university. But none of this is new either, because this happened when my parents were attending the university before 1994, before the so called constitutional dispensation, before so called democracy. So, I mean, in my parents' time, you could argue, oh, it was the Natal Civil War, it was a bloodbath, there was so much of civil unrest. But what is the excuse now? I don't know. I don't get it. So it's incredibly traumatic. But look, everybody in KZN knows that it's a bloodbath here. We know that everybody, most people have depression, anxiety, CPTSD, PTSD of some sort, right? That's not surprising to me. What is surprising is that this book was on my grandparents' bookshelf to begin with, because I don't consider them to be particularly political people, nor the children that they raised, namely my father and my aunt. Now, let me just qualify the statement, oh, my grandparents are not political. My Aji, so that means my grandmother on the paternal side, she would identify herself as a Hindu. And now I make this distinction between spiritual and religious. Religious is what you do, spiritual is what you be. Religious is all of the outward practices, and spiritual is the inward practices. You know, you reflecting, introspecting your personal relationship with God. That's if you believe in God, whatever you believe in, right? And that's very personal. So she would identify as Hindu, but more as religious than spiritual. So she was so busy trying to control, gaslight, um, invalidate me, inflict things upon me. So when she was sharing her religion, it was not really coming from a place of love, it was more coming from a place of fear. I definitely felt that very strong fear as a child. So she was so busy with that that she never really looked up at the world around her and her surroundings, I suppose. And in many ways, look, I don't blame her because I know what my family lived through. My Aja, on the other hand, is completely different. So if you were to look at him, I mean, he could be Irish. Okay, but if you were to look at him, you would think that he's Irish. That hat, the tweed that he wears, the scarves, the songs that he sings as well. He's never been good at Hindi. Like, he had to learn Hindi later in life. He has always been quite good and quite fluent at English. So he would sing all of these English folk songs to me, and I didn't really think it was a big deal. I thought, like, oh, well, cultural imperialism, so it's not that difficult to believe that an Indian man living in South Africa would know English folk songs, because he was mostly educated by Christian missionaries, not by the government, because the National Party did not care about us. So he knew all of these folk songs and he would pass them down to me. And I didn't think anything of it until later in life in choir when I was about 15 and we had to sing that song. And it's apparently a football anthem. When you walk through a storm, hold your head up high and don't be afraid of the dark. Something like that. And it's basically walk on, you'll never walk alone. And as much as, so nobody in my family is stupid enough to romanticize war because some of them were conscripted. But there is a fraternity and there is a brotherhood, definitely, and a kind of camaraderie that comes out of war just by pure necessity. People have to stick together. And so that's where that song comes from, You'll Never Walk Alone. And I was told that it's a soldier song, not a football song. And then on my maternal side of the family, there's a corresponding song that's exactly the same, but it's sung in Bengali. So um, ekla cholo, ekla cholo re. And that one, the women sing it so jolly and they clap it, and it's like an inside song. It's a chore song, especially when you're doing rhythmic work. And especially like on my maternal side of the family, we learn how to do things like preserves. So we learn how to preserve mangoes and to pickle everything because straight after the harvest, there's only so much you can eat and then it'll go rotten. So there's certain things that you do to preserve things. Um, so it's very strange that there's these two exactly corresponding songs. One is English and one is Bengali. And only recently I realized that's because under the Churchill administration, he engineered the Irish famine and the Bengal famine in exactly the same time to exactly the same end. So Irish people became indentured laborers and Bengali people also became indentured laborers. Irish people are quite well known, especially in the USA, and Indian and Bengali indentured laborers are known particularly within the Caribbean and sugarcane plantation work, that kind of thing. So yeah, I'm just putting pieces together now, and it's quite amazing. So on my paternal side of the family, I don't really know what they did, but I know some were soldiers, some were policemen, some were railroad workers. My Aja worked as a hawker, shopkeeper at certain points. He just did whatever he could do to make a living. So I guess there was a sense of jolliness to him, but not really jolliness, more like a grudging acceptance. But again, he's not political in the sense not political like this kind of book where it's intellectual masturbation of people who have never left their house. It's middle class people where politics is an aesthetic that they take on. It's the aesthetics of caring while not actually caring, the aesthetics of empathy while not actually engaging in empathy. So, especially now when I'm reading this Fatima Mirror thing, she's the one who makes me angry, not so much white South Africans, because a lot of them, they are really coming from a genuine place, like Ruth First or Joe Slovo or any of these people, right? Fatima, I started writing the margins, oh, how I loathe this woman. Fatima, go outside and touch grass. And I put three big question marks here. I just said, severe infantilization of black people when it suits you, and severe undermining of the agency when it suits your argument. So basically, what she's saying, because when she mentioned the Cato Manor massacre, she was basically saying, "Oh, black people are totally not in control of their own bodies, and so it's not their fault that they were murdering Indians." I don't know where the argument is really going, but anyway, because black people are just so stupid. Now, you're being so racist to them, let alone me, the ones who actually got murdered. I don't understand why you consider yourself to be an anti-apartheid activist then. It's fine if you want to be a trophy wife, because, I mean, that's what Fatima is. She's a trophy wife. That's okay. But then don't claim activism. Don't claim that you care about people who you clearly don't care about. This line as well. The early Indians stood aloof from the African as strangers do from each other. Speak for yourself. You came here in 1860. The rest of us have been here a long time before that. So I left a question mark. Nagas, three question marks. Where's your citation? Because you have no citation here. Speak for yourself. Don't speak over indentured people. She's a joke. And so, why is this kind of joke on my grandparents' bookshelf? I have no idea. Because they know the kind of politics of living next to the railroads that you worked your indenture on and then being forcibly evicted from that. My grandparents know being human trafficked from one part of the world and forced into another part of the world, slavery. We know having no documentation in this country. We know that being manipulated. We know working for minimum wage, forcing yourself to learn English and trying to assimilate into this strange country with all of its strange cultures, and ultimately being taken advantage of at every single step that you turn. My family knows that, but we don't know this kind of politics, this kind of intellectual masturbation, and it really hurts when you're being used and abused in this way, just for somebody to make a point. So it's disgusting. And UKZN has not changed in any way from this intellectual masturbation. So look, I don't know. But it's worth reading this thing. It's worth knowing what Savarnas are up to. So and how their minds work. So I don't know. Because these are the people who human trafficked me and brought me here in the first place, without my consent, by the way, for cheap labor. And now they are the ones claiming to be indentured. It's absolutely disgusting. Anyway, this called Chitralekha. I picked this up because, I mean, that's somebody in my family, that's her name, the Bengali side of the family. And Bhagwati Charan Burma is a writer. Burma can be anything from like Savarna to like all the way down to like Dalit. So A lot of surnames in North India, especially, are very vague. And when you live in the Hindi belt, your culture gets completely engulfed by Hindi supremacy, by Hindutva. And so sometimes there's this animosity. People from the south, like from South India, because they're a little bit further away from the imperial belly, I guess. Okay. Anyway, so I picked this up because obviously, like, it's a name of someone in my family. It's Bengali, so let me go and read something. Let me go learn something. This whole thing of Chandragupta Maurya. Somebody from India told me, no, it's not Gupta like how you're thinking now of Banyas. Because the thing with Banyas is that they have no creativity, they have no culture, they have no agency. So what they do is they just loot. Like they will loot everything. They will loot cultures, they will loot names, they will loot. So even the title Gupta did not belong to Banyas, firstly. So this empire of Chandragupta Maurya, I assume, was Shudra kings before it was ambushed. So I don't know because even the title OBC is so broad and there's so much intersectionality within that. You get land owning OBCs, but you get kind of migrant worker OBCs who are privy to so many caste crimes and hate crimes, so that within the social stratification, they have a lot more in common with Dalits than with dominant OBCs. And so it's very complicated. And it's definitely important to be considerate and to listen to as many perspectives as you can and to just lead with empathy. I'm ignorant as hell. I don't know what is going on. But I don't think that's the point. The point is to be as empathetic as you can. So I don't know. It's not really that I feel a particular connection to Bengali culture. There's not only one, there's multiple Bengali cultures. But, you know, the so-called Bengali culture has been very much appropriated by upper caste people, and they have claimed that it is theirs and it always was theirs, and so it kind of alienates the creators from their own creations. But as I've learned more about India, I've actually gained a lot more hope, if that makes sense, because like in South Africa and from my knowledge of the US, again, I only have very limited knowledge of the US, but from what I understand, blue jeans was a very working class thing and it was almost an object of shame. So people would use them and they were very hardy. It was a very hardy kind of material. Denim was like that. And so people wouldn't want to be seen out in public wearing blue jeans. But there was a reclamation movement of it where the working class took back their working class clothing. And so blue jeans became the symbol of resistance, I guess, and it was absolutely beautiful. That's where a lot of folk and country and bluegrass music comes from. It's the working class people taking back their stories and taking back their shame. But obviously, that did get appropriated by middle classes, and then blue jeans almost became a symbol of capitalism and US nationalism. So, I mean, that's exactly what happened in India. A lot of our resistance songs, so that one, Walk On Alone, from my Bengali side of the family, it got appropriated by Rabindranath Tagore. And I mean, that's okay, I guess. So, Bengali culture, it's not like I really have an attachment to it, but it's complicated. And I think it's okay for things to be complicated. That's fine. This is Every Man in Medieval Miracle Plays, and I just love medieval English plays and things. I just love Shakespeare. So, like, there's a trope, and this is very true, certainly of my own family. You tell your dad, and it's not like only an Indian dad thing, but you tell your dad, "Oh, that fruit was nice," and then he comes back the next day with carts of it, with crates of that fruit. Which, yeah, I started writing poetry when I was a teenager. I think it was just like writing was my way of making sense of things, and I had a lot to make sense of: human trafficking, racism, all of the violence that I saw, all of the things. So I would just write it down, I guess. Um, and yeah, when my father came to know, oh, you like poetry, okay, and then he gave me a bunch of poetry books. There was one from Chaucer to Gray, and there was Andrew Marvell and all these things, and it was very special to me, and I quite loved them. So I think that I will quite love all of this as well. Like recently, I read things like Dante Alighieri, and I read all of these Russian classics, and they just made me so happy. So I need to get back into this because one day I was getting very weighed down with caste and the material reality of it, and one of my friends said, why don't you go read a novel? Like, just take your mind off of the really heavy things for now. And I should have taken him up on that offer. He's also a big fan of Dostoevsky. Maybe I need to go and read some more Dostoevsky. Ah, okay. So this is called Jataka Tales, and it's apparently some old Buddhist folk stories. And obviously, those have been perverted over time, and they've been appropriated and changed and passed down through oral tradition, and all of these things happen. So I'm just interested, to read some of them, see whatever I do, recognize whatever I don't. I'm just fascinated. In the first page, mentioned that Samoans, Zulus, all of these different people actually have very similar stories, so that's great. This is just another Bengali novel, so I have nothing deep there, which I'm going to pick up. Oh, there's the dot and everything. It's all from the same publisher, J.Co. Books, and this is actually based in Mumbai. So Calcutta was a slave harbor. Myanmar, like Rangoon, there's like another place as well. I forgot. But Calcutta and that kind of the Bay of Bengal was like slave harbors. Mumbai was like settler harbors, and Gujarat was also where settlers left from. So why do my grandparents have settler books? I don't know. Somebody gave this to them. This is not their own. It was passed down by somebody. So I don't know. Anyway, this is Harry S. Truman, President from Missouri by Ralph G. Martin. Why do they have this? This is so weird. Like, if I were to move to the US, Missouri is not on my list. I like not the North at all. No, I need to go to West Virginia. I need to go and do the Appalachian Mountains. I think I would totally fit in there. Like when I read about West Virginia and the coal miners being indentured and Scrip and that coal company like owning the entirety of Virginia, that's literally like the East India Company. Them being indentured laborers. That's exactly my family history. So so our book haul got cut off, but this is Stars in Space by Patrick Moore. So who doesn't love Stars in Space? That's one of the reasons why I picked it up. But the more compelling reason is because this used to be a library book, and so it's stamped many times. Stanger Government Library, Stanger State Indian High School Library, Stanger Government Indian High School Library. What government was stamping this? Because the National Party certainly didn't care about any Indian population in South Africa at any point in time. If Indians were acknowledged before 1994, then that was referring to the Gujarati Banyas. So that's Mohandas Gandhi, Fatima Mir, Ismail Mir, and they were so insistent on inflicting themselves upon the national discourse while spectacularly having nothing to say. It just continued, I mean, after the democratic transition. So when Rehana Ibrahim Valley wrote Kalapani, Caste and Colorism in South Africa, that was released about 20 years ago. I just thought, how can you be so spectacularly ignorant about the material reality of South Africans? You've gone to Paris, you've visited India, but you've never visited the slums and ghettos in Durban. Clearly, you have no idea what is going on here. Slavery was one generation ago within my family. So, if you were following me on YouTube about 2 years ago, I was kicking and screaming at banyas and just saying, please touch grass, please walk outside and observe what is going on. But through reading about the caste system, I realized they just won't do that. Like, they're not the kinds of people who want to get their hands dirty. They want the profit, they want the money, but they don't actually want to do any work. So I thought, okay, I must be at the very rock bottom of the caste system because that's the only reason why you would become an indentured laborer, right? And be working under feudal land tenure. So I went to rock bottom, or so I thought, of the caste system, which was Shudras, which was peasants and slaves. So I thought, okay, great, that's me, slaves. But then I found out no, before annexation, Shudras were kings. So they owned land under a system of feudalism. They had access to the courts even in the year 1900. Even today, not all OVCs, very few, but they have dominant positions within society. They have power within society. And when some mainland Indian told me about this thing called Dalit scholars, Dalit feminism, I was shocked because where do you get Adivasi scholars? In South Africa, I am completely not heard at all. And that kind of brings me to my next point. Because my parents grew up under racial segregation, so they were surrounded by Indians, right? But their understanding of Indian was very strange and very distorted, and very different from what I understand. So they seemed to know a lot of OBCs, and they were very heavily under OBC jurisdiction. So I guess this imposed a sort of anxiety on my parents. I don't know. And this all explains what Professor Ashwin Desai was saying. Because this idiot, you know, the way I wanted to slit his neck when I started reading some of the things that he wrote, because he was writing about how, oh, on the slave ships on the way to the plantations, there were food spillages. And so that's why the North Indians think that they're better than the South Indians and all this shit. And I thought, yay, Weda, I don't know where you got all this from. I'm sorry, I just couldn't stop laughing when I read that. And I thought, is this what you are writing in academia? Like, I am not going to deny that my family is racist, right? I'm not going to deny that. I'm not going to deny that there is Hindi supremacy within my family, that there's colorism and all that, right? But there's a reason why they don't trust people who eat seafood. And it's not racism, it's not casteism, it's not what you think. When you live up in the hills and when you live in these very inland environments, obviously you don't you don't eat fish because you are inland, right? So by the time fish gets to you within the ancient times, it's rotten a long time ago. So there is that very pragmatic reason. But we don't trust people who eat seafood because of Paralemun, because of the black market that Banyas were involved in. You don't want to get involved in the black market because then you will be pulled into all of these things, the black market, human trafficking, drug trafficking, prostitution, all of these things that are still ongoing. So anyway, it's it's so dark and it's so heavy. I'm shocked. Guys, I was so innocent. I was so cute. I don't know why I even bothered going down this rabbit hole and what compelled me to ask these questions. The easy answer is just to say, I saw casteism, I saw cruelty when I moved inland to Johannesburg. I had to move into, the house of these Savanas and these people, and they thought I was one of them. And so the kinds of things that they would confide in me, I was shocked. Um, anyway, this is the book. And also, this whole, I mean, it is falling apart and everything because my grandmother just doesn't know how to throw away books. It's just wasting things is not something that we're accustomed to. Orion, I do need to learn about Orion and a lot of these constellations because there's some answers here. The Library of Alexandria and why that burnt down, and the Southern Cross and the Hunter and everything. All of these things are lining up. Anyway, that is the book haul. I honestly don't know how I come across to an audience on YouTube. I probably do sound a little bit clinically insane, but that's fine. You've been stuck with me for so long. You've humored me.